In this video, you're going to learn how to set up Unity IAP for in-app purchases in your game. This allows you to create in-app purchases for multiple different platforms, all configured in a same consistent way. What we're going to do is create a UGUI store page for our game that shows all the different products that we have configured. Each of these products will have a name, description, an icon associated with them, and a price. You can have slightly different variations for each platform, or you can set them up to be the same across all platforms. I'm not going to cover how do you set up a Google Play app or an App Store app. I do have videos for at least one of those, maybe both, depending on when you're watching this. There'll be links in the description to those if you need to know how to set up a Google Play app or an App Store app. Hey, Chris here from LlamAcademy, here to help you. Who, me? Yes, you! Make your game dev dreams become reality by helping you monetize your game. We're going to jump right into it today. The very first thing you need to do is install Unity IAP via the package manager. If you're on an older version of the editor that doesn't have the package manager, highly recommend you upgrade your engine version before you start working on this. I'm just going to ask you to link this to a Unity project. And before you do that, make sure you've changed your company name and your app name in the project settings. Otherwise, it's going to look kind of weird and be hard to find it on the Unity dashboard in a little bit. And again, I really want to emphasize this. It's incredibly important that you go into the Google Play console and make sure you have your app uploaded there already, or the Apple App Store and make sure your app is uploaded there already as well. If on the Google Play side, you're not at least in internal or alpha testing, it's not going to let you test your IAP stuff. And if you don't have it on the App Store, again, you won't be able to test your in-app purchases. It doesn't have to be published on the App Store, it just needs to be in App Store Connect. Once you've imported 4.1.5 from the Asset Store, if you open up your project settings, services, in-app purchasing, you'll see that it has 4.5.2 as the latest version, even though the package manager doesn't show that. We'll install the most recent version and make sure you've toggled on in-app purchasing. This will probably also enable the legacy analytics, and you'll probably get an email from Unity telling you that you've created a project using legacy analytics and you need to upgrade. They're trying to replace the legacy analytics with the Unity Gaming Services analytics, so I expect eventually Unity will remove this legacy analytics and have the in-app purchasing package work properly with UGS analytics. In the meantime, this is okay, it still works. Next up, if you're releasing on Google Play, you'll open up the Google Play console, scroll down to Monetize, go to Monetization Setup. They're going to have this licensing area. You're going to want to copy this key, open up the Unity dashboard, select your project, click this gear for project settings, and you'll have this Google license key. You're going to want to edit this and paste that in here. Also in the in-app purchasing, you'll want to paste the same key into this options field and click update. If you're having trouble clicking update here and it's giving you an error, what you might need to do is toggle off legacy analytics and toggle it back on. At least that's what I did to resolve the error when it was telling me that I didn't have authorization to add this key. I expect this is some weirdness with the in-app purchasing and the legacy analytics that will eventually go away. Now we want to configure our in-app purchasing catalog. You're going to want to take some time to really evaluate what kind of in-app purchase options you want to sell, which ones will add value to your players, and which ones will add revenue to your game. At the top, we'll go to Services, In-app Purchasing, IAP Catalog, and here's where we'll configure our products. For your ID, you're going to want to put in something that is unique per product that may be also useful to differentiate between maybe higher tier ones, segregating which kind of products might be offered to different groups of users, and which ones may be on sale. We'll get into that in a little bit later. Give it a title, a description. These are both mandatory, and it's also important to note on the ID that you need to use underscores. You can't use spaces and you can't use hyphens. So you can use camel case, Pascal case, or snake case, basically. Once you filled in the title and description, we're going to move on to payouts. Payouts are what we are going to give to the player after they purchase this thing and have spent their real money. There are a few types. They have other, which is for anything that's not currency, item, or resource. In this case, because I'm saying it's some bucks, which is some in-game currency that I'm going to create, we'll call it currency. The subtype is just a string that we will internally use in our application to reference, hey, this is this type of currency. So maybe I have bucks, maybe I have coins, and maybe I have energy or something like that. The quantity is how many of them you want to give. And the data field is again just a string field, and we can put in all kinds of information here. For a currency payout, I don't expect you're generally going to put in a data thing. but you can potentially put even JSON objects here. If you're going to have other or item types, you can put in JSON objects defining what type of equipment they're going to get. So for currency, we're just going to leave it alone. We don't have to provide any data. Under the store ID overrides, you can optionally give an override per store, or if you can have them be the same on every store, you don't have to fill this out. For the price, this is how much do you want to charge? For the lowest one, I'm going to choose $1.99. Pricing template is a little bit more of an advanced feature. We're not going to talk about that in this video. For the Apple configuration, they don't have as much control over the price. You can't just offer kind of whatever prices. You have to pick a tier. So since I said $1.99 for Google, we'll pick $1.99 for Apple as well. This screenshot you can't really provide yet because we haven't configured them and we don't have a way to show how the user will see this in-app purchase item. Today, the export to Apple does not work because Apple has retired Apple XML delivery. I'm hopeful and expect that Unity will update Unity IAP to use the new system, which is connecting to App Store Connect via an API, meaning selecting a screenshot here will not add any value to you, at least until that automatic export is set up and working correctly. I'll talk a little bit more about this in the section dedicated to the Apple IAP configuration. I'll just add a couple other in-app purchase items, and before I go too far into that, there's another field here called type. We have consumable, non-consumable, and subscription. So consumable would be anything that they purchase and immediately is consumed. So like a power up or getting currency. Anything that's consumable, the user should be able to purchase multiple times. Usually a non-consumable would be something like items, weapons, something like no advertisings, unlockable things, something that you would not want the user to purchase multiple times. And a subscription would be something like, I want you to have to pay $10 a month to access some extra content or something like that. Or a lot of times you'll see subscription-based VIP access that gives like bonuses to how many daily rewards you can collect, that kind of stuff. There's not really a lot of difference in terms of how you configure them. You see if I select non-consumable, there's nothing changes. The main difference between these is how do you handle in your app the purchase of this in-app purchase item and how the store will handle billing of these things. For example, subscriptions, Google and Apple will automatically charge the player every month until they cancel. So let me quickly just create a couple extra products so that we have several to look at. I'll make one non-consumable that's an all guns unlock that will unlock all the items in the game. I'm still going to call this an item with a subtype of all guns, and I don't need to provide any additional data because I would expect in my game if I have this Boolean flipped of, hey, I've unlocked everything, it just automatically counts as unlocked. Or I would go through and unlock every gun if I see that this purchase was successful for this item. And obviously I wouldn't want them to purchase it multiple times. Right here, let's talk about sales. Google and Apple don't give you like an automated sales structure on their store. If you want to offer sales, you have to pre-configure those products on Google and on Apple, and just in your game or your backend service, whatever you have, you will choose when to offer those sale items. So you won't show them normally in your normal product list that we're going to create. We'll filter those out that are going to be on sale. And then based on whatever logic you have, you would say, hey, on this day, I'm going to offer this thing on sale. So I want to be really clear about that. That was something kind of a weird learning for me whenever I was putting together my game, is there's not an automated sale functionality on Google and Apple. It's all handled by you in your app. So here you can see we have the exact same configuration as what we just did. I've just configured it to be about half the price of the full price one. So then in my game later, I would offer a promotional sale after some trigger happened or some random day, whatever. And I would offer them this as a special sale with a limited time window. That's how that works in all these games that you see. That's all the items we're going to make. How do we get these into where we can actually offer them? You'll want to use this App Store export. I'll use the Google Play CSV first as an option. We'll talk about the Apple one in a little bit. If you're going to work on both Google and Apple, I actually find it's easier to do the Google one and then use those screenshots and submit those to Apple if you're going to have the same experience on both. So let's start with Google. I've done the export. What we can do is on the Google Play console, go to Monetize, In-App Products. Up here at the top, there's an import button. Just go ahead and choose that CSV file that Unity IAP created for us. Now you can see all those show up here, no problem. You have the option to edit these in the console. Generally speaking, I discourage doing that because then you will have drift from what you have defined in the IAP catalog versus what you have displayed on the Google Play console. And what we're going to build to show to the user today is going to be based on that IAP catalog. So if you start changing stuff here, it won't exactly match to what we have defined in the Unity editor. Let's start setting up that demo store page now. We have some in-app purchases configured on Google at least. Let's show those on the UI. Before we jump into the code, we're going to deselect automatic initialization of Unity purchasing. We're going to turn that off because we're going to fully manage this in this one class. We're going to initialize Unity purchasing based on the IAP catalog, and we want to, after we've initialized Unity purchasing, be able to build the UI. So we're going to handle some events that happen, and if it happens automatically, it's a little bit more challenging to do. So the very first thing in our demo store page is we're going to implement the iStore Listener interface, which comes from the Unity Engine purchasing namespace. That has 4 functions: on initialized, which is called whenever it's successfully initialized; on initialized failed, whenever it fails; process purchase, which is called whenever the player has successfully purchased an item, they've been charged for it, and now we need to give them the item that they purchased; and on purchase failed, which is a callback whenever purchasing fails. Right now, all those will just throw an exception. That's okay. We just need to know that we're going to implement these 4. We're going to make a private async void awake because in here, we're going to do something asynchronous. In here, we're going to set initialization options to equal new initialization options. I'm going to do a preprocessor directive here, which is pound if Unity editor or development build, pound else set environment name production, and then pound end if. What this does is if we've ticked the development build, then on the device, we'll still use set environment name test. And if we're running in the Unity editor, we'll also set the environment name to test. We will conditionally compile this with set environment name test. If I've not checked that checkbox, then we're going to set it to be production. So it'll use a different line of code based on if we're developing or we're not doing a development build. That helps us make sure that we're not hitting our production system of Unity gaming services. If we're just doing development and messing around with things, it'll help us keep all of our analytics and all that kind of stuff separate. It also allows us to test different things in the test environment versus the production environment. For this video today, if that's too confusing, you can just set environment name production and leave it alone. After that, we can initialize Unity purchasing. So what I want to do is asynchronously load the product catalog that we just configured using resource request operation equal resources.load async, a text asset called IAP product catalog. We'll set the completed event to be handle IAP catalog loaded. And before we get into that, the IAP product catalog that we just configured in the Unity editor is stored in our resources folder already for us as a JSON file. That's really helpful because then we can know our IAP catalog immediately after this game object is created. In the handle IAP catalog loaded that accepts an async operation, we're going to get that resource request equals operation as a resource request. We'll log that asset just to make sure we got what we expected. And if there's any issues with it, we'll see it on that log. We'll define a product catalog to be a JSON utility from JSON, the product catalog that accepts the request asset as a text asset, and we're going to get the text from that. That's a lot of words to say. We're going to deserialize that text into our product catalog. Then we'll define a configuration builder to be configuration builder.instance standard purchasing model.instance appstore.google play. And for each product catalog item in the catalog of all products, we're going to add each product ID and type to the builder. So what we're doing is waiting to load the catalog, deserialize it into some object that we can deal with, and then setting up this builder with all the products that are in that catalog. The next thing that we're going to do is initialize Unity purchasing with all of these products. So then the Unity purchasing module will understand here are all the products available and how to purchase them. And this being the iStore listener, so it'll start calling callbacks on this object to get our uninitialized, on initialization failed, all those ones we looked at a second ago. We need to do something though, because this is only working for Google Play. What if I'm building for the App Store? That's where these compiled directives come in again. If Unity Android is defined, that means we're building for the Android build target. We're going to do what we just wrote. We're going to do elif, which is else if. We have Unity iOS defined. We're going to do the same thing, just passing in appstore.apple App Store instead of Google Play. We'll define one more else in case maybe you're doing the standalone one. We'll pass in appstore.notspecified. That's really just a fallback case. You shouldn't run into that case if you're only building for Google and Apple. Now let's look at some of these callbacks that are going to happen from the Unity purchasing module. On initialize failed, you're going to want to do something if we, for some reason, can't initialize the purchasing. There are many reasons. Well, there's 3. There's purchasing is not available, there's no products available, or the app is not known. Purchasing is unavailable. That can happen if maybe the device is offline. You probably don't want to display the IAP store at all. Just tell them it's not available at this time and move on. If no products are available, that's probably a misconfiguration and you need to look into that. If the app's not known, that's also a misconfiguration. That means that the App Store or Google Play doesn't understand your app and will not allow the user to purchase anything. So based on which one of these are happening, you might want to do different things. For now, we're just going to log an error that it was unable to be initialized. Now, if we've successfully initialized, that's on initialized, we're going to get an iStore controller and these extensions. We're going to want to keep a reference to both of those because both of these are used whenever we're performing purchases. So most likely after we've initialized the store, we can then create UI elements for the player to interact with to actually perform purchasing. You might not want to do that immediately on initialized. In your game, you might instead do this whenever the user clicks to bring up the page. You might create the UI elements. We're going to do it right here because we're only going to have that one page. But remember that we wanted icons because it's kind of not very enticing to just see text on the screen to purchase it. We probably want to show the user some icons. We're going to go over to something called the Store Icon Provider. This is a new custom class that we're creating. It's not a mono behavior, it's not anything, just a standard C# class. What we're going to do here is based on the ID of the product, we're going to look up in the resources folder so we can load them at runtime, a texture to show for that particular item. To do that, we need a public static dictionary of stringed texture 2D called icons with a public get and a private set. We'll initialize that by default. We'll have a private static int target icon count. We're going to count how many things are going on and keep track if something failed to load for any reason. We'll need a public delegate void load complete action and a public static event of type load complete action called onLoadComplete. That way we can get a callback after we've loaded all the icons. We'll define a public static void initialize that accepts that list of products that we expect to get. And we're going to expect this is called only one time. So we'll check if the icon count is 0, we'll do something else. We're going to log an error saying you're messed up, you shouldn't have called initialize. If we're actually initializing this for the first time, we'll just set the target icon count to equal products all.length, and we'll iterate over all of those products. Doing a resource request operation equals resources.loadAsync of type texture 2D at store icon / and then the ID of that product. That means in our resources folder, for each one of our products, we're expecting to have a texture 2D with the name that matches the ID of that product. That is a really important piece of this. If you don't have them with the right name, you won't get any icons and your store page will look ugly. We'll do operation.completed plus equal handle load icon. We'll define that now. In here, we will again do a resource request equals operation as resource request. We'll check if the asset is not null, meaning it did successfully load something. We'll add that to our icons dictionary with icons.add request.asset.name and then the request.asset as a texture 2D. We'll check if the icons count is equal to the target icon count. If it is, we'll call that callback saying we're done loading. And if the request asset was null, that means we didn't have an asset there and we need to subtract our target icon count because something failed to load. We didn't quite properly configure that. One last convenient thing we'll do is create a public static texture 2D get icon that accepts a string ID. There'll just be a little safety check around our dictionary that we'll use instead of directly accessing the icons, which means we could really make that dictionary private. So we'll check if the icon count is 0. If it is, we'll log an error and throw an exception. Otherwise, we'll try to get that icon and return it. Now that we can load some images, let's go ahead and initialize our store icon provider immediately after Unity purchasing has been initialized. We'll set up onLoadComplete to be a new handler called handle all icons loaded, and in handle all icons loaded, we'll start a coroutine to create the UI. Again, when you call create UI may be different. It might be whenever you're pushing the page to actually show the store page. Here we're just doing it because we only have one page. I've got a video about how you can manage pushing and popping pages off from a stack to easily manage when to show different pages and even trigger events before they come on screen, after they've left screen, and all that kind of stuff to keep your UI very easily managed. There's a link in the description and card on screen to that video. To create the UI, we first need a prefab. In the create UI, what I'll do is sort the products by their localized price. We can then iterate over each product in our sorted products, and then we'd like to create the UI elements. Well, we don't have anything to create yet, so back up at the top, we'll create a private serialized field UI product called UI product prefab, and a serialized field private horizontal layout group content panel. Since this is going to be I'm imagining a horizontally oriented game with the phone sideways, that's what we're going to do. If you have a vertical one, you might choose a vertical layout group. Let's open up that UI product and set up everything that we need to know to actually display a product. Remember earlier we were saying that we want to display the name, description, price, and an icon. So we'll create some private serialized fields for those elements. We'll instantiate a bunch of these, and we need to configure them based on the product that we're trying to display. So I'm going to define a private product. That's the data model that we're holding on to because it has a little bit more information than what we're actually displaying. And then we'll do a public void setup based on that product. That way the UI is responsible for setting up how does it display for that particular model. We'll cache that reference to the product, and then we'll set the name text to be the localized title, which comes from the metadata, the description, which also comes from the metadata, the price text to be the localized price string, so that'll be like $1.99 or whatever. And then afterwards I'm going to put the ISO currency code. That looks a little bit weird because you'll have like $1.99 USD, which might be fine, but normally people will see like the $sign. This way it's just a simplistic, let's just display it. Next we'll find the texture for this one with store icon provider.getIcon product.definition.id. So that'll give us the texture as long as it was found. If it was found, so it's not null, we'll do sprite equals sprite.create, passing in the texture, a new rect that's the size of the sprite, and we'll set the pivot to be in the middle of the sprite. Then we'll set the icon sprite to be this one that we just created. If there's no texture found, then we'll just log an error saying that there's no sprite found, so something's wrong. That should indicate to us that we're missing a sprite texture for a product. And that should set it up. But we still need to have it where when we click a button, it will do the purchase. We'll define a public void purchase that will hook up in the inspector to the button on click. We'll disable the button to prevent any accidental duplicate clicks. But then how does the UI send to the iStore controller, hey, I want to purchase this item? We're going to do that with a delegate function. So back up at the top, we'll define a public delegate void purchase event that accepts the model and an action on complete. And then we'll define a public event, purchase event on purchase. So we will, from this UI product, raise an event whenever we click on the button to say, hey, this is the product that was purchased, and please call this callback on complete after it's done. You could optionally make this accept a Boolean to say, hey, this was successful or not. And then maybe you do something special on the UI if it was not successful or something if it was. Let's go back to the demo store page. Back in that create UI coroutine, wherever we're creating these products, let's go ahead and set them up. We'll instantiate a new instance of that UI product prefab. We'll do UI product.onPurchase plus equals handle purchase, which we'll define in a second. UI product.setup, passing in the product, so that way it'll configure all the text and all that kind of stuff, and then set it to be a child of the content panel transform. Let's define that handle purchase now. Most likely, whenever you are setting up a purchase, you're going to want to show some kind of loading indicator or something like that, because a native API on the device will be called to initialize that purchasing. So you might get like the little Google Play pop-up or a pop-up to confirm the purchase on iOS. So we'll define a private game object loading overlay and serialize that field. Back in handle purchase, we'll just set that active. And then to actually do a purchase, we'll do storecontroller.initiate purchase, passing in the product. Because this demo store page is the iStore listener, we're going to get the callback here on purchase failed or process purchased, depending on if it was successful, canceled, whatever. We're then going to want to cache a reference to this action so we can call it back on purchase fail or on process purchase. Back up at the top, we'll define an action on purchase completed. And then in handle purchase, again, we'll do this dot on purchase completed equals on purchase completed. In the on purchase failed callback, we're just going to log that, hey, there was an error purchasing this, and then call that callback. We'll reset on purchase completed to be null because we've invoked that callback already, and then set the loading overlay back to false. On process purchase, this is what we get whenever it's being successful. We'll do basically the same thing, call that callback, set on purchase completed back to null, set the loading overlay back to false, and then after that, you're going to want to actually apply that product to your player. So if it's they purchase some currency, you should add that correct amount of currency. If it's they purchase an item, you should unlock that item for them. Do whatever you need to do to ensure that they actually get the item that they just spent their real money on. Then at the end, you will return purchase processing result complete. Because this is just a demo of this and every game is going to be different, what you do in this will be very different based on your game from what somebody else does based on their game. If you're not sure how to persist data for your player in complex types, I've got a video about how to store and persist data using the JSON data format. There's a link in the description and card on the screen if you need to check that out. Just integrate this into whatever system you already have to give them that in-app currency. Let's come back to the Unity editor. And because this is already kind of a long video, I'm saving us some time. I have already created the demo store page where we have a canvas. In here, we'll attach the demo store page. In there's a background, a title, and then I have a scroll view because most likely I'm going to have several products that will go off screen. I want this to be horizontally aligned. So in that content panel, I've attached a horizontal layout group with 50 for left, right, top, bottom padding, and also 50 for spacing. Child alignment is set to middle left. I also have this loading overlay, just saying purchasing, and then at this time, your native Android or iOS purchase window should be displayed. You're not going to want to keep all of that text. This is probably a great time to remind you that the full project is on GitHub. You can check it out. You can even reuse the same prefabs, textures, and these scripts to get you started on implementing in-app purchasing for your game. You can even copy paste this canvas to get you a great starting point. So let's start hooking some stuff up. Content panel will be that scroll view content, the loading overlay, and then for the UI product prefab, I've already created one. We'll attach the UI product script to this. And what you see here is what will display to the player whenever they're going to view these products. So the name of the product will go on top. We'll have some kind of image in the middle, a description below, and then a price and a green button to purchase it. We'll hook up all those references, and that's all that we need to do here. Other than on the purchase button, we need to add an on-click listener and set it to call UIProduct.purchase whenever we click it. We'll add that UI product to the UI product prefab, and if we click play, hopefully everything works. Okay, great. So we see a few bucks, many bucks, loads of bucks, all guns packed sale, which is a little bit not good because I want the sales to be displayed differently. Most likely you don't want to show all the sale products in your main content. We can see that we can scroll. It's also not quite exactly the right size. So there's a little bit more work to be done here. We'll see that the purchasing is happening immediately because we're using a fake store. We actually have to deploy to the device to see the in-app purchase pop-up come up. And that's just because we're using the Google Play Store right now. Let's now look at how we can test this without having to deploy to the actual device using the fake store. And handle IAP Catalog loaded, we want to add these two lines of code to standard purchasing module instance, use fake store UI mode, and then set a UI mode. Standard user is useful if you're just trying to test the flow as a standard user. To test everything, you can use .developer user, which will allow you to configure what kind of failure results and test every scenario. You'll also want to do standard purchasing module.instance.use fake store always, set that to be true. And just to make sure everything's working on our handle purchase too, you might want to set this on purchase completed to be on purchase completed before we initiate the purchase because that was happening in the same frame. It wasn't resetting the button correctly. If we go back to the Unity editor with the standard user, when I try to purchase, you'll see this fake store come up. Do you want to purchase this thing? We can say buy or cancel. You'll see that we got that log, failed to purchase many bucks because it says purchasing unavailable. If we click buy, we'll see it was successfully purchased. I think there's two last things to do here. One is make sure that our store page will display products and allow us to scroll properly. And number two is remove the sale items from our default display. We want to handle those separately. So on Create UI, before we start ordering everything, I'm going to use a link function called take while. And we'll say take while item arrow not item definition ID contains sale. So remember I was saying whenever we're configuring our IAP items, sometimes it's useful to configure them where the IDs will indicate what type of product they are. So in this case, we can identify all sale items because they have sale in the ID. Then we'll order all of those by the localized price, then continue doing whatever else we're doing. In the same function, what we want to do immediately after we create all the UI is to resize that content panel based on the contents that we just put into it. So we'll be able to correctly scroll left and right based on the screen size and how many products we have. To correctly calculate the size, what we're going to do is get the horizontal layout group from the content panel and read some of the properties from there. So we'll get the spacing from the group.spacing. We'll get how much padding is applied on the horizontal by doing group padding.left plus group padding.right. I called this XY padding. I'm going to rename that to be horizontal padding in just a second. We're going to get the item size by doing content panel.transform.getChild 0 because we should have at least one child. We'll get the rect transform there and then grab the size delta X. That'll tell us based on the content panel and maybe the layout component, how big did it size this thing on the horizontal. We'll then grab a reference to that rect transform of the content panel and set the size delta of that to be a new vector 2 with the horizontal padding plus the spacing plus the item size times the sorted products count. So we're going to add spacing and item size together, multiply that by the sorted products. That'll give us the total size horizontally, and then we just need to add that horizontal padding, which will cover the left and the right padding of the content panel. We're going to keep the Y size the same because we're not adding anything vertically. You'd do a very similar process if you wanted a vertical layout group, just grabbing padding bottom and top and using vertical padding for the Y and keeping the same X size. Let's check it out one more time. We'll see that all of these show up without the sale item now, and our scroll view no longer shows any scrolling because I don't have enough items to fill up my screen size. If we were to greatly shrink how much size we had available, you'll see that it correctly calculates the size so we can scroll and it still looks good. If we check out the scene view, we'll see that the content panel perfectly fits these items, including the spacing. If we open this up on a Mac, we can see the same thing is happening. It looks okay. Remember I said that Apple requires that you submit a screenshot of how this looks. So you can take a screenshot of this exactly like it shows here, and you can save that without spaces in the name. Then for every product, you would select the screenshot path and select that product. I will warn you that Apple XML delivery is not working today, and Apple has shut that down. I found this out after I had recorded the entire video planning to show exactly how to make it work for both Google Play and iOS. And while trying to put together the iOS portion, I ran into some problems. So I'm going to show you the problems you'll run into and what we would hope that Unity would implement for us to prevent us from having to do a bunch of manual configuration in App Store Connect. So we would select for every product screenshot path, select that. For your Apple SKU, that would be the specific name that you provided on App Store Connect for your app, which you can find by opening up your app, going to Bundle ID, and you'll find it there under the Bundle ID. You set that up when you first created your app. The second piece of information you need is your team ID. You can find that team ID by coming here at the top right, where you can edit profile, and it'll show you your team ID right here. I blurred it out because this is supposed to be a secret thing. So you'll copy that, paste it down here on Apple Team ID, and make sure you have your Apple SKU set up here. And you'd say App Store Export, and then ideally it would say like App Store Connect JSON or something like that, because again, Apple XML delivery is no longer supported by Apple. They have this tool called Transporter, which you can try to submit your in-app purchases with, but you'll see we get some errors telling us that this is no longer supported and that we should instead use the App Store Connect API. As you can see here, there is a relatively simple structure, but by the time you convert your XML into this format, it's probably easier just to go straight into App Store Connect and create all these products. So instead, on App Store Connect, open up your app, come down here, Features in-app purchases, press the plus button, and you have to manually fill this out with consumable, the name you want to display, and make sure that your product ID exactly matches what you have in the IAP catalog. You can configure prices, configure localization, just like what we were doing in the IAP catalog in the editor. And here you'll see we can also configure a screenshot of how it looks to purchase that. You'd have to repeat that for every single in-app purchase item that we configured in the IAP catalog in the editor. So that kind of sucks. I'm really hoping Unity will take the feedback I've already provided to them, make some kind of updates to this XML delivery so it'll maybe be the App Store Connect API, maybe we can directly submit it from the editor. That'd be super cool. But in the meantime, this is what you have to do. As you can see, using Unity IAP is a pretty cool tool to allow us to set up in-app purchases for our game that works across platforms. There's very little really we have to do other than displaying the store products after we've configured them in the Unity editor. In the items, you could do things like segmentation to only offer particular products to particular user groups in your game. It's really, you set up the products and then do whatever you need to do after they're set up. The more products you do have though, it does get a little bit more cumbersome to deal with the store pages because you have to submit screenshots of those purchased options to the App Store, and that's just a little bit time consuming and annoying to do. And of course, the more you have, the more you need to test that they're all working correctly. I will also say that there is a codeless way to set up IAP. I didn't really go into that because I don't like the limitations that puts on you. I highly recommend you follow these steps that we've done so far. It gives you a really easy way to set up everything and not a lot of code to get it working. I hope you got a lot of value out of this video, and if you did, go ahead and like and subscribe to help the channel grow, reach more people, and add value to more people. This new video is posted every tutorial Tuesday. If you want to support this channel, you can go to patreon.com/LlamAcademy or just click the join button right here on YouTube to become a YouTube member. With both of those options, you can get your name up here on the screen, get a voice shout out starting at the awesome tier. Speaking of those awesome supporters, there's Gerald Anderson, Autumn K, Matt Parkin, Ivan, Rulin, Paul Berry, and Iffy Obelus. And at the tremendous tier, there's Bruno Bozic. And at the phenomenal tier, there's Andrew Owen and Andrew Albright. Thank you all for your support. I am incredibly grateful.